Hi, Cambria. We're going to take a look at your rhythm and repetition and Notan posting here. I'll give you a little bit of observational feedback. So we made the video, the overview video. Hopefully you watched that one on both of these. And that kind of covers the why, what the intent is of the project, and some of the more specifics about what I was observing in the overall class, how things were going. This, as you know, as I make these personal videos one-on-one, it's more about the aesthetics that you're using, and more about what I'm seeing visually, compositional things you can do to sort of clean things up. And so here we go. Let's take a look. So we have the undulating rhythm. You have alternating rhythm going on here, and you have the progressive rhythm. Looks like you have them fairly well done. The undulating rhythm is probably the more elusive of the patterns. And each year I think to myself, what's another way I can describe undulating rhythm? What's another way that I can approach it so students can get into it and kind of understand exactly what's going on with the word undulating and rhythm right next to it? And the best that I can come up with is essentially first taking a look at the alternating rhythm. Alternating rhythm being, of course, the even repetition of a motif. So you have a motif, which is some sort of archetypical subject, right? Like a chair or a tree or a person or whatever it happens to be, and that subject repeats. So you have a repeating element, usually in groups of two, for alternating rhythm, because it's a comparative. So you use alternating rhythm mostly when you want to establish a this versus that. Look at this and compare it to that. That's why you would use an alternating rhythm. Alternating rhythm sets up a kind of either a tick-tock kind of thing or an even skip, 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 skip kind of thing, right? It's very even. It's very natural. Not natural. It's very even and it's very predictable. That's the word I was looking for. Very predictable. Progressive rhythm is like alternating in that it has the element, it has the repetition, it has that infinite feel, except instead of it being even, it progressively changes in one direction or another. So it progressively gets farther and farther apart, or it progressively gets closer and closer together. And those diminishing things continue on to infinity, getting closer and closer and closer to some sort of thing. The sort of looking off into a distance is a really good example, which I saw you were doing. Undulating is when you have a rhythm and you have a repetition, but the motif is sort of elusive. You don't know what the motif name sort of is. Things like waves in sand, right? Or an abstract sort of undulation of leaves or grass flowing, or waves, or the sort of overlapping of clouds, that kind of thing, where you can see that there's definitely repeating elements. They even have some predictability to them in terms of their pattern. They may have a slight progressive rhythm to them, but the subject itself isn't quite there. Meaning it's sort of more abstract. You're not sure what your motif would be. In yours, you have established a motif. And so mostly what you're doing with these undulating is you're establishing, this one's probably the closest to an undulating rhythm because we have more of an abstract a subject, but I'll get to what this one is really close to in a moment. So what you're doing here is more about this progressive rhythm here, and then you've got something that we could call a dissonant rhythm. Dissonant rhythm is, which is what this is when you do have a motif, repeating element, in this case, like sticks, right? This twig stuff. A dissonant rhythm is one that has a motif, but and it repeats, but the rhythm is unordered. It doesn't have any necessary like pattern to it. That's what this is, right? I mean, you got a repeating element, you've got the motif, but it doesn't necessarily have a pattern to it. That's dissonance. Undulating would be as if it did have a pattern to it, but you couldn't really identify what the motif is. If you could see a motif and a pattern, that's either going to be progressive or alternating. This is alternating rhythm that you got here with the fence. This is progressive when you have it there. We're giving names to these things because as we emphasize them, they each have their own sort of emotional energy that comes along to them. So this would be alternating rhythm with dissonant within these logs. This is more of a dissonant rhythm going on. You've got the repeating element, but it's hard to say where that would continue. If we were trying to maybe focus in on some of these down in here in more of an ordered pattern or a predictable pattern, and it still remains somewhat abstract, we could get into some undulating rhythm. It's a hard thing to do. With these projects, I am mostly interested in your exploration. There isn't like, get the answer right. What I'm trying to do is open up these sort of options for you, identify what these things are called so that you can use them to communicate the things that are important to you. An alternating rhythm like this, means that we're going to try to compare these two things. You want the audience to look at these two stones and kind of consider the differences between them. You're saying, look at this one and look at this one, and let's think about what's similar and what's different about them. That's the emotional impact that you have when you do this kind of thing. It also creates this structure, which is really, really great. So now you have here with your progressive rhythm, you're introducing these shadows, which, is great. Oops, hopefully you didn't hear that. Somebody was crashing into something back there. So this is a progressive rhythm that has the repeating shadow elements. You maybe didn't know that we were doing a shadows, but it was intuitive for you to see these patterns. So really good intuitive thing. When you're making these images, pay very close attention to things that are in the scene that don't necessarily need to be there. The photograph is all about reducing things down to things, ultimately to the things that are just necessary. I know I've said that many times, it's reductive. Photography is reductive. You crop things out, move in, you take things out of focus, all until there is only what you consider to be the necessary elements within the composition. And stuff like this, these little lights here, they're not participating, right? So you would want those out of the image. Here is much more considered. We feel more like you are considering everything within the composition. It's very well sort of ordered. I'm not saying everything has to be ordered. I'm saying everything needs to participate. There's a difference, right? I don't want to say everything has to be like hyper organized. That would mean that everything kind of looks like maybe self-conscious. You do want to work naturally and have elements in your image that look like they just were there, but everything needs to be addressed. Nothing wants to be not participating. And in this case, everything here is participating, but it doesn't feel like you're wrestling with the composition. Where do things go and such. You get a little close to the edge right here. We could have used a little more room up here right in the corner. These are just minor things that you will learn over repetition and repeating your photography. You'll learn to kind of figure these things out, that giving a little more space like you have here, maybe not quite that much, but a little more space. Maybe if this was down, this was the height of this, right? So if it was right here instead, that would have given you more breathing room and really would have opened up that composition much better. But you've got this wonderful cast shadow, brings you up to the tree. Where are these pointing? It's pointing up, pointing, pointing, pointing. These aim you here. You've got a diagonal that's bringing you down here. diagonals are energy, brings you straight down into this, which then leads you back over here. So excellent work there with this composition. Like I said, everything needs to be considered. It doesn't need to be hyper organized, but it needs to be considered. The organization will just happen because of that. We still want them to feel natural, though. We don't want it to feel self-conscious and overly, like you got your hand on everything either. All right, let's look at the Notan, the cast shadows here, and then the spaces in between. Okay, so photography. Photography is light, as we know. Photography is about capturing light. The subject is just an armature for that. It's just the thing that light reflects off of. We worked with the repetition, repeating elements and how that communicates. Now we move into how light, the subject, the material itself. We're talking about form. Form is composition. Material is form. Material of photography is light. So we're going to study that. We look at the shadows. Shadows are produced by light. Can't have a shadow without light. So shadows are produced by light. The light is interrupted by objects. Objects create cast shadows. So you have those two different types of shadow. Local shadows, which are just where light isn't hitting an object. You have cast shadows where light is interrupting a light source. We're working on cast shadows here in the composition. And the idea here is that we move farther and farther away from the literal. We move farther away from making images of things and start to think about photography as being about things. What is it about? What's important to you? That's what it's about. What is important to you? So something like this, rather than taking a picture of this twig, you've made an image that is about this twig because it's relating to the solid trunk or the parent. See, now this becomes more like an embrace. This becomes much more considered, this overlapping layer that's happening here. There's some things that are in the way, things like this that you could have probably done without. Coming in here and getting a little bit closer or doing some other things to remove this kind of element. One of the things you can do, and I do often when I'm looking at images, is I'll put my hands up like this. You think that's sort of silly. You see people do that, like, oh, it's kind of like a weird, but it really does help to kind of block out some elements of the photograph. So I'll close one eye and leave my left eye open. I'll kind of pan around. I'll do this in the in the scene itself when I'm on location, and kind of look. If you do this and cover up this area right in here, you're gonna see how it helps you to look at what you were really interested in right here. It really makes that much more powerful. And even if you cover up over here as well, those two areas, you cover those two things up, all of a sudden, this becomes, this becomes this wonderful, beautiful pattern. All of this, it almost becomes an abstraction, this sort of modeled ebb and flow. See how that works? Go ahead and put your hands up there like that. If you do that, you'll see what I'm talking about. I'll leave it there for a moment for you to do too. You see what I'm talking about? How that line, how all those lines work? You can move your hands around and kind of try different compositions as a horizontal kind of thing. That is a wonderful way to sort of revision things and kind of look at how imagery will sort of have an impact on those things as we, as we kind of move forward. These are much more about the object and a shadow. So this isn't really kind of getting into the heart of it. This is more where we're hoping you explore here. Not that these are not effective photographs to kind of explore, but here it's more about this object than it is about the compositional strategy. Let's see what happens when I do that. Even doing that, kind of pulls it into a whole nother direction. This, on the other hand, wow, isn't that beautiful? Wow, that's amazing. Now, all photos don't have to be this way. I'm not trying to suggest that you have to always make photos like this, but it's such a wonderful thing to explore in the possibilities of what you're doing. Imagine if, just go ahead and crop out that that duck's head right about here. Crop out right here with your hand, like that, and then crop out the top of it as well, like right in here. So I'm looking right here. I wonder if I can do this way. No, it's not going to allow me to do that. Bummer. Okay, so cropping out here and then here. So I'm doing right here, cropping out from the top, and then right here, I'm cropping out from the side. And look at that. It becomes an abstraction. It still can be discerned. Like people would see your audience will notice that it is some sort of sculpture, right? That it's some sort of object. But I've gotten rid of this. I've gotten rid of the head, which makes it not a duck. It becomes more of a shape now. And now this becomes the hero of the image. I've got this beautiful kind of interaction. The audience now isn't locked into the subject. They're now, what they're doing is they're seeing something that's about a thing, how this shape is interacting with the ground. This is what I'm hoping you guys are able to understand by doing projects like these. That's what I'm trying to move you toward. So that when you do make photos that are subject-based, that you understand how to push that subject into an emotive world. Because you can make images that are that include things that are recognizable, that still have the emotive quality. That's hard. That's very difficult to do because the photograph renders things so well that it's sometimes hard for people to get beyond it being of a thing. Here, as you will, if you've seen the overview videos, you'll know exactly what I'm about to say, and that is, again, letting these images, these twigs kind of run off. You just put your hands up there as we've been doing, and kind of look at different ways that you could crop out that image and make the composition more about the ebb and flow, the ins and outs of all of these different shapes. Your eye is very good. I mean, we're working, you've got the bones here of all of this. You've got the necessary elements, in other words. All the ingredients are there for spectacular photography, and you hit it on many of them. You're really like, you ring that bell. There's a few of them that just need to be tuned a little bit, right? You need to be able to develop that fine tune to be able to know, I need to move it this way or that way. And that only comes with experience. I mean, there's no skipping over that. You just have to continue to make art. You need to continue to make compositions, whatever medium it is. I don't know where photography is going to be with you, where it's going to fall in terms of how important it is, and so on and so forth. But it could be something that really is an important medium for you, because it seems like a natural sort of compositional format for you. You don't seem to struggle a whole lot with it. So I hope you continue with photography. So that's what I have. I look forward to seeing more of your images, and we'll see you in the studio. All right. Bye now.